Hello, everybody. Okay, looks like we're actually live and running now. Excellent, excellent. So my apologies for back and forth here. For whatever reason, Hangouts wouldn't start, and I could not get the Start Hangout button going. And finally, it came alive after a long time at 99%. It actually materialized. So um, let's get right into it then. And since we're a little delayed here, and I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation. Let me just switch screens here for you, and we'll get going. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so today is going to be a little different discussion than what we usually discuss. Um, in some ways, we're going to be talking about using audio notifications for emails. As you probably seen before, and I'm sure you've used it, we get notifications on when we get new emails, and we get a little chime usually on our mobile devices that says that you get new mail. And that worked for a long time, and people still use it now, and nobody really made any difference or made any changes. But there is a new approach that I just recently found out about, and I'll show you precisely how it works. The first thing, let's talk about a couple of things first before we get going. So this particular approach that I'm going to be showing you is using both the desktop version of Gmail and the mobile version. Okay, so you're going to be using both to make it work. And it's not like you can use one or the other. You actually have to use both, and you'll see as we go through it why. Um, so that's one thing. Second thing is this is kind of like a multi-step process. It might be a little confusing at first, but you can play this video back as many times as you want. And once you get used to it, you see it's not that bad actually. But it does take a number of steps. So let's go ahead and proceed forward here. And another thing to mention is that even though Gmail comes for iOS and comes for Android and for desktop, web basically, they're all slightly different in terms of functionality. Definitely the big difference between desktop and the mobile versions. Don't know much about iOS version because I don't use iPhones, but I'm assuming it's probably pretty close to the Android in terms of all the different features and capabilities. So what I'm going to be showing you today is Android, and if iPhone doesn't do everything I'm showing you, then you can complain to Apple. I just I'm using Android, and it works well on Android. And but with that said, also keep in mind that there are different not just operating systems, but also different versions of those operating systems. And also you have different phones manufacturers, and they have their own little embellishments. So we're playing with a bunch of different things here, and hopefully it's going to work for you just as well as it works for me. I just wanted to mention that there are different things out there. In this particular case, what I'll be showing you is I'm running Windows 10 on my desktop, and that's what the Gmail version of desktop version of Gmail that I'll be showing you will be Windows 10. And then the Android, I'm going to be running on my shiny new Samsung Galaxy S7, which currently is using Nougat 7.0. That's the version of Android that I'm running on it. And so that's what this whole setup is going to be shown on. Okay. Moving on here. Initially, like I said earlier, people set up phones whereby somebody calls you, you hear the regular ringing tone uh, on the regular old landline phones, and they pretty much, some of them sounded a little different than others, but pretty much it was kind of just a single deal. And then when this mobile phones came out, initially it was a similar deal, but then they gave us ability to have multiple ringtones, and we could actually indicate per person, which is what the current versions of the phones allow you to do, indicate that you want to have a different ringtone sounding when somebody calls you, a particular person calls you. So for example, in my case, I'm going to pull up my Samsung here just to show you a quick example. I think you're going to get a kick out of that. So I have set up, for example, when my uh, wife calls, it sounds something like this.
Warning, warning. It's the wife. It's the wife. Warning.
So you get it, basically that kind of a deal. And so unmistakable. You can't mistake, who's calling you when you get that kind of tone. And then when my sister is calling, it sounds something like this.
Your sister is calling. Your sister is calling. Your sister is calling. Are you gonna pick up the phone? Pick it up. It's your sister.
Okay, so you can have all kinds of fun with these kind of notifications, and of course, you have a really good idea when something like that comes out from the speaker of exactly who is calling you, which is very handy, very useful. In many ways, you don't want to have every single person having a different ringtone, but at the same time, for some key people, it's a very handy and very useful feature to have. And of course, all of our phones have that capability. The problem with visual notifications, what we normally get on our cell phones, are visual notifications. You um, pull down the notifications bar, and then you see all the different things that are happening. You have some Twitter, potentially new something happening on Twitter, something happening, with email notifications and Facebook, and on and on and on. Basically, all kinds of notifications that come up. And then when you look at these notifications, you can click on them and you can see the details. But the bottom line is you need to visually check them out. You slide the screen down, and then you see all these notifications visually, and then you take some kind of action on them. The problem is that unless you actually take some time to turn the phone on, because usually it's locked, so you have to unlock it and then get the screen back on, and then you go ahead and look at your notifications visually, and all of this takes time, some manual labor, if you will, and it interrupts you every time you need to do this. You interrupt whatever you're doing. So that's when audio notifications came, because it's nice to be able to just hear a chime to indicate that, hey, something new is happening. You need to look at notifications, so you don't sit there every 5 minutes and keep looking at this notification, which may not be there. Now you know exactly when something comes in, then it makes a little chiming noise, and you know that you have notification. Then you go ahead and look at it. The audio notifications are definitely useful and great. The only problem is that even though they allow you to set different notifications similar to ringtones for when people call you, there are some problems with those. And the problems, let's just go right into it. The problem with those is that you get a chime based on, let's say, Gmail itself saying that you have new emails, but you have no idea who they're from. So the example I showed you earlier with audio notifications for phone calls, at least in my case, you can see that when my wife is calling, I know exactly that it's her calling because it's going to be that particular notification sound. If my sister is calling, then it's going to have this other deal because it's actually telling me, it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's telling me exactly who is calling. So the folks at Google, they put together this feature, and I'm not sure about exactly when they did it, but I just recently found out about it, and it's extremely useful. And they're saying you can actually set up a sound effect or ringtone specifically for every single label that you may have in Gmail. Okay, so just think about that. Instead of just getting a chime to indicate you have new email, you actually have built-in capability. If you're going to use it, by default, it's all turned off, so you're not going to hear anything but some sort of a chime. Okay, similar to ringtones for calls. But you actually have ability to specify notifications, audio notifications, different sounds for whatever labels you wish. Okay, and that's what I call label-based notifications. So it looks, I'm showing you some, so I'm not showing you my phone. and kind of weird angles and everything else. So you can actually see. I just dropped some screens here to make it easier to see. And you can see an example here that when you say, and we'll get to shortly to how you get to this point, when you manage labels, you can see they have this particular one here where it says Elena. Uh, you can see it says most of them say not synced. That's how you're going to see on your in your case if you haven't set them up. But once you set them up with sound, you need to have the synchronization on, sync on. And so in this case, it says this was going to be synchronized for the last 30 days, and it says sound is on. So you're able to actually see it under manage labels in Gmail settings. You can see that which of these labels, these are all, part of my labels that I have. And then if you look specifically at this particular label, you can see its screen. When you actually click on this on the left here, when you click on it, it will give you this screen on the right. And you can see it says last 30 days of messages will download when connected. So it will synchronize. And you have to turn this on. Otherwise, the functionality doesn't work. And then down below, it says under notification, it says label notifications. So you indicate checkbox to indicate, yeah, you want label notifications. Then under sound, you select the sound you want to play. And then you can have it vibrate if you want or not. I mean, that's up to you. And then notify for every message. So it can notify you for every message that comes in, or just after a certain interval, whenever Gmail normally checks, if new messages come in, that'll notify you. So it's up to you if you want to click that one or not. This is the one right here is you have to click. It has to be selected. Okay, and then the process, basically things work. So another problem with this approach, it's kind of cool that you can do labels for, you can do sounds for labels. Another problem is that there are too few, too many, and what do they mean? I said, what I mean by that is that number of these sound files that you have by default in the phone is not great. Maybe there's like 20 or so sound files. Okay, so that's compared to my probably over 100 labels. Obviously, it's insufficient. On the other hand, if you look at it from a different perspective, if you look at how many labels you have, then potentially you'll have way, way too many options going in if you're going to start setting up sounds for every single label, and you have hundreds and hundreds of labels. So, it becomes, if you have all kinds of different chimes and you have a bunch of these going on, you can't tell which one is which, for which email, which one comes in. It becomes basically a barrage. It's kind of like with colors. If you look at Google Keep has colors. I think they have 8 colors that they can let you choose from. And initially you figure, okay, that's definitely not enough. I mean, I can do all kinds of different things, and I want a lot more than 8. But once you start using it, even 8 becomes a little bit too much, at least for me. I can't remember what each of those colors stands for. I may remember 1, 2, or 3, but I can't remember all 8 of them. Because just the way, at least my mind works, is just you can only remember so many different things, considering everything else you need to remember. And so having many options can be too many, because they don't really describe what's what. Like, for example, in Trello, they used to have labels, also, color labels, and they really didn't mean anything until they allowed you to indicate description for each label, so you can see the color and you can see the description. Then it became so much easier to use, and you see exactly what they are, because the description identifies what it is. In case of Google Keep, what I actually did is I set up a separate keep note which I call legend, specifically to indicate that blue is to do and red is this and this is that. So I know myself that I can easily pull it up, and it's pinned, so I can see it easily. So I know which colors to use for what notes I create, so I don't have to worry about remembering all 8 colors. But that's just 8. Here we're talking about potentially having hundreds of labels, and bunch of these labels potentially having their own sound files. So it'll make it almost impossible, realistically speaking, to be able to tell which sound represents what kind of email. And of course, if that becomes the case, then the whole thing becomes counterproductive, because you just can't tell what's what. Yeah, you have a lot of different sounds going on, but you have no idea what they mean. Okay, so that's the problem with having, like I said, either too few options or too many here. And in terms of what they mean, who knows what they mean? It makes a chiming sound. Maybe it means this label, maybe it means that label. You don't really know unless you use very few of them. So how do you resolve this problem? So the solution that I came up with, which is very simple actually, is to use custom recordings. Just like you heard my ringtones for my sister, where it says your sister is calling, your sister is calling. It's telling me, it's making the sound true, and I can hear it. I don't have to look at anything, but at the same time, it's actually telling me specifically that it's my sister that's calling. I don't have to wonder about any kind of chime representing my sister, which is what the original intent was of all these different sounds. Here, it's actually telling me, using English, that my sister is calling. And, the other deal was kind of a humorous deal to say that, the wife is calling. So it's specifically identifying precisely what's going on. And so if we can do the same thing here, we'd accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, meaning come up with a custom recording for labels for Gmail. And that way, when it actually plays, then we're going to know exactly what email we just received. And that, of course, changes the whole setup dramatically. Okay. So what I used an app called Voice Recorder from the App Store. Uh, sorry, from the Google Play Store. If you're on iOS, it'll be the App Store. And it seems like a pretty good solution. One problem I discovered is that MP3 files, for some reason, would not work, but I could be wrong about that. I just didn't have time to play with it. Um, there is another problem that I discovered, which I'll mention a little bit later here as I show you the details. It may have been that. It may not have been MP3 problem, it may have been that. But in the meantime, I already put in the presentation to use the OGG format. That seems to work just fine. So if you try MP3 and it doesn't work for you, try the OGG format. That definitely works. Okay, so we just create a custom recording, and this is what the icon for this app looks like on my phone. Voice recorder. You can, like I said, you can get it from the Google Play Store. And we go ahead and we record the sound using it, and then continue from there. But before we get into this thing, let's actually go through the process from beginning to end. And so the first thing we need to do is realize that the sounds are tied to Gmail labels. And there's two ways how we can create labels. Actually, there's three ways. One way is when you create a new email, you can indicate what label you want to give it. But that's for emails that you send out. Another way is whenever you get an email from somebody, then you can assign a label to that at that point manually. You just say change labels and change to whatever label you want. The problem is, in this particular case, what we're trying to do is we're trying to have a label in place already whenever the emails come in. Okay? And so obviously we can't be assigning labels. We need that process to happen on the fly. Whenever email comes in, we already needed to have the right label. Okay? We're not going to be manually assigning all these labels. So the third approach, which is what we need to use, is to actually create a label automatically whenever an email comes in, if that email fits certain criteria. And the way we can do that is we cannot do this on the mobile devices. We can only do this on the desktop, and we use desktop version of Gmail to do that. Okay, we create a filter. And so to do that, let's just do a quick demo here to show you exactly how you do that. So we're going to jump into Gmail here on the desktop, and I will adjust the screen as I always do for Zera. She always asks for the screen to be bigger. Okay, so here we have some emails sitting in the inbox, usual stuff. To create a filter, we simply pull down the search options here, and as you can see right here, it says create a filter with the search. So we need to specify what is the search. Okay, and the search, let's say I wanted to create a label when I get email from my son, for example. So if I get email from Ben here, and let's say the subject has words important. Let's put some more criteria in there. You could just specify an email address or multiple address. So you can fill out any of these fields however you see fit. In my case, I'm going to use the word important somewhere in there, and I'm going to put in the email comes from Ben. As long as that is the case, just that's the criteria, I'm going to create a filter by clicking here. And then what I'm going to do, I'm not going to tell it to do anything outside of what it normally does, but I will tell it to apply the label, and I'm going to select the label called, I already have Ben for something else. Let's create Ben dash important. Okay. So I'm just going to create this new label called Ben dash important. And what we're doing is saying whenever there is an email that comes from Ben with the word important in it somewhere, then we want to apply a label called Ben dash important to that email and not do anything else. We just leave it alone. We don't have to do anything else. I'm going to go ahead and say create filter. And it says your filter was created. Okay. So now to test it, I'm going to go ahead and jump into Ben's account. Hopefully he won't object. It won't ask me to log in. It does, but it knows his password. Awesome. All right, so we jump in. So here's Ben's email, and we're going to go ahead and simulate an email from him. I'm going to say to Oleg, and I'm going to say testing video notifications, and I'm going to say important. Read this. Yeah, just so there's the word important in there somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to go and send it, and push the screen down. And when I refresh here, I should get an email somewhere here. Quickly check which email account I sent it to. Yes, right on. What's it waiting for? 1 second. There we go. Just took a little while. So there we got that, and you can see right here that there's an email from him. It's the email that we were looking at, right? That he sent to me, and then because it had the word important, see, it assigned a label to it called Ben-important. Okay, so we didn't have to do anything other than set up that one filter, and now we wind up getting with this email, right? So if I look at it on my phone, then I will see. Let me go back to my phone real quick here and jump into Gmail. And I'm going to turn the screen back on just for 1 second. Let me see here. It's pulling things up here. For some reason, Google is slow today beyond belief. It wouldn't start the Hangout, and now the email sync and everything is just barely moving. I don't know why. But anyway, as you can see at the top of the screen there, see if I can make it so you can actually see it. Right there. There's the email from Ben at the very top. And trying to make it so it's visible. There it is at the top there. And you can see it's got a label called Ben-important. Okay, so we got that part done. The next part is to set up the mobile part to make sure that the mobile part is working in terms of having this label in place. It plays some kind of sound. So let's go through that process. I'm going to jump back into the presentation. This is all you have to do on the desktop part is you simply identify what criteria you want for a label, and you create a filter with a filter for that criteria, making sure that you set up some kind of label, either assign a label or create a new label, but there's got to be some kind of label that gets automatically attached to the email which matches the criteria. Okay, and so once you do that, then you're done with the desktop part. Then we move on to the next part, and the next part is we need to record some kind of custom recording. And so we record an audio file using voice recorder. And the reason I said that MP3 may not work is because what's happening is you have two different things going on. First of all, Android will try to give you a notification when you get emails. So if you have a bunch of emails, and when it actually does its every so often it checks it, and then it just tells you that you have new emails. It potentially could have multiple emails come in, and it just makes this one sound saying you got emails. Okay. And secondarily, you have also potential to have sound coming from particular labels. So they wind up clashing with each other. And so as we go through the process, I will show you how to eliminate this clashing thing. And initially, when I had this problem, and I thought maybe the problem was MP3, I had this clash occur. I just accidentally finally figured out what was going on. And so now I don't have this clash anymore, but I haven't recorded MP3 to see if this would work or not. And so we'll just, assume that OGG definitely works. So we'll go with OGG. Okay. So anyway, let's move on here. So we've got step one was to record a sound, and so I'm going to jump out to here, and I can't really easily show you. I wish they had some kind of tool that allows me to show my mobile on the main screen in real time, but unfortunately I could do it with Chromecast, but I can't do it with this thing. Yeah. So anyway, so I get into the app for recording, regular recorder for the voice, and then this email is coming from Ben, and it's important. So I'm going to record a little deal. I'm going to call it Ben Important. I can call it anything you want, by the way. They don't need to be all Ben Important, just so it's easier for me. Ben Important. Just so I know what it is. And save it, and then play it. This is what it sounds like. This email is coming from Ben, and it's important. Okay, so it recorded my statement just fine, and it saved it. The problem with this particular app is it saves it in particular location, and I noticed that for some reason it doesn't let me change location, and so I can't put it on SD card. And also, when I did actually use a different program to put it on SD card, it didn't seem to work well with notifications. So the best thing to do, I think, is just to stick to your internal storage, not putting things on SD card. And so after you record the actual notification and you save it, it puts it in a folder other than normal notifications, but you need to have them in normal notifications for the process to work. And so with that being the case, your second step is to use some kind of file management app. In the case of this Samsung here, I have a thing called My Files that allows me to move files from place to place. And essentially, you're moving it from a folder called Recorders. In my case, as you can see right here, it's in the internal storage, and it's stored in Recorders. You're moving it to Notifications, which is the same level, basically a different folder. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to show it to you because the screen is too dinky, but I'm going to follow this exact process. I'm going to go to My Files, and I'm going to find um, go to internal storage, go to recorders, and find the Ben important. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to say I want to pull down the menu, and I'm going to say I'm going to move it. And when it says where do you want to move it to, I'm going to say internal storage, and I'm going to go to down to where it says notifications, and there it is. And I'm going to put it in notifications, and click on done, and that's it. So now in notifications, I actually have a file called Ben important. Okay, so that's done. Next thing, I pull up my Gmail on my mobile device and open settings. The challenge with settings, I don't know why they set it up the way they set it up, but if I click on my Gmail and I pull down the hamburger menu on the top left, as you can see, it shows. Let me see if I can make it so you can actually see it. Yeah, I can't make it show. But anyway, it shows the categories like promotions, updates, and so on. And then it goes into labels, and it just goes labels, labels. You just scroll and scroll and scroll. In my case, it's scrolling and scrolling forever. And then finally at the bottom, you see the option for settings. And so you want to scroll all the way to the bottom and select that option at the bottom of your labels right there. The screen looks something like this. You have all these labels, and they're on alphabetical order, and then you have the settings option right down below. So you click on that, and then when you click on the settings option, you have it shows you various Gmail accounts. So you need to click on the Gmail account you wish to use, and then it takes you to the settings for that particular Gmail account. And then if you scroll down, there is an option called Manage Labels. Okay, so you scroll down to where it says Manage Labels, and you tap on that. And when you tap on Manage Labels, it'll look something like this. Right there, there's all these different settings options and Manage Labels. You click on that, and once you click on it, it'll show you all your labels. And for each label, it will show if it's synced, and it'll show if it has a sound, it'll have a sound. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and go to a label called Ben Important, Ben-Important. And in the case of my label, it says not synced, which is all of yours are going to say the same thing, not synced, just like you can see here on all of these. And so when you click on that particular label, click on not synced, it's going to come up and give you a little pop-up. And that pop-up will, let me just get to the pop-up here. Pop-up will look something like that. And it'll give you three options: none, last 30 days, and all. You want to select last 30 days or all. Last 30 days is fine. It'll be faster that way. And that's it. It'll jump right back. And then you'll have a screen that looks like you see the screen on the right, but everything below label notifications here will be ghosted because this is not going to be checked by default. So you want to check it like I show right here. And once you check it, the ghosted things below it will become unghosted. And then you want to go ahead and click on sound. And once you click on sound, it'll say what sound do you want to use. And if you put it in notifications, there should be your sound. In my case, it's Ben Important. And there it is, Ben Important. I simply click on it to select it.
Is coming from Ben, and it's important.
And it's going to play it for you, which is perfect. And then you just can, once you select it, you can just hit the back button to get back to where you were on that screen. So now it'll actually show you the name. In this case, it show you the name of the sound is run. In my case, it says Ben Important. Then you can click on Vibrate if you want. I mean, you certainly don't need it if you don't want it. And then Notify for every message. So this will notify you faster than if you don't have it checked in, because if you don't have it checked in, Gmail will check for email message every so often. And if you have email messages that match, it'll notify you then. If you say notify for every message, every time a message comes in, it'll automatically do this process. So this will be faster if you check it off. But this part is not mandatory for this process to work. It'll work either way. Main thing is to have this label notification checked. Make sure the sound is selected to whatever you recorded is, and that you say, and then these options are up to you if you want to do it or not. Once you do that, then you can simply hit the back button to back out. It'll jump back to labels, and I'm just going here saying basically everything I told you already. It's what this screen shows. So you go back to uh, using the top left arrow on the screen to go back to wherever you were sitting before. Let me jump back into the presentation. And there we go. And so you can tap on that top left arrow at the top of the screen on your mobile to back out all the way to labels. And you can repeat the same process by clicking, selecting a different label, selecting different sound for that label. So for as many labels as you want, you can just continue to repeat this part. If you have everything recorded and you move them to the right notifications, now you can just assign these notifications by following this process where you select a label, indicate that you want to sync it for the last 30 days, so click on sound, select the sound you want, and then select the option to notify you, on every email basically, and um, repeat that cycle for as many labels as you wish. Okay. And before we go here, one last thing. The only other thing I wanted to mention is I told you about this conflict where you have two different things happening. You have sounds that are playing based on labels, and also you have sounds that are playing based on Gmail in general. And they can clash. That's where I had the clash occur. And that way one sound will actually supersede the other sound. You won't even hear the other sound. And so to do that, so it doesn't do that, to make it so it doesn't do that, my recommendation is just turn off general Gmail notification sound. And the way you do that is by, when you go to settings initially, instead of scrolling down to where it says label notifications, instead you click on inbox sound and vibrate option. Okay. When you click on it, it'll jump and it'll still say manage labels, but this is for everything. And here you just simply remove, I'm sorry, you don't remove label notification. You just simply change the sound to be silent, which means it's not going to play any sound for general Gmail notifications. If you remove label notifications checkbox here, nothing is going to play at all. So you can't do that and have, in other words, it's not, the other ones are not going to work if this one is turned off. So you want to make sure this label notifications is turned on, is checked, but the sound for it you can make silent so it doesn't make any sound, and that way only notifications for individual labels will make sound. Okay, so that's that. And then once we get done with this, I guess what, before we do anything else, let's do this. Let's jump into Gmail. Let me just quickly jump out of let me jump out here to Ben, and let's go ahead and compose another email. And the email will be to me, and it'll say testing again. I will say, let's go play ping pong. Important. So we get both that and that. And we just send this email to me. Okay. And well, when we finish the presentation, we'll see, hopefully the phone will make what it's supposed to do and play the sound accordingly. Make sure I get out of this thing. 1 second. Yeah.
This email is coming from Ben and it's important.
Okay, so you see that right there. It played the sound right there, pretty quickly, and it played that particular sound because again the label matched. So we did everything exactly correctly, and the email went and it did it did its processing, and then it played the sound because it's that label. It played that particular sound. So I know exactly where my emails are coming from and which ones are important, which are not, by using this kind of approach. So right here on this screen, as I say, some do's and some don'ts. Do in this particular case is you need to think about what's really important to you to take your attention away from whatever you're doing at the time, and make that sound indicating that you're getting an email from somebody. Okay, so using a name or using whatever it might be. I mean, if you think about it, for example, maybe you're working on a new client and you want to make sure that you get back to this client as soon as possible, but you don't really want to hear about anybody else. So you can set it up in such a way where whenever the emails come in from that particular client or dealing with issues with that particular client, maybe it's not even from them, maybe it's something that just has a particular name of the project somewhere in the email, and you told all your colleagues whenever they email you about that particular contract to put the project name somewhere in the email. And so you set up a label with that project description, and then you record something that some kind of notification saying this is for project X, and you set up the process in motion, and that's it. That's way you do not get interrupted with anything, any kind of noises or anything, because everything else is going to be off. The only time you will be interrupted when this particular email regarding this project comes in, because it's a current project, it's important for you, and so on and so forth. Then you want to be notified. Otherwise, and so remember, you're not eliminating emails. You will still be able to get to your emails. You will still be able to do everything you normally do, but you'll be able to do it on your own time when it's convenient for you. Okay? And so you're not going to be, in other words, you're not going to be interrupted. You're only going to be interrupted by things that you want to be interrupted with. And so that's what makes it so compelling and so useful, is that the interruptions only occur for things that are important to you. And so definitely think about what it is that's important that you want to be interrupted about, and then obviously record appropriate notifications, and then store them, and time to labels and set up filters, everything like we just went through. At the same time, I would not recommend, like I said, in my case, I have hundreds of filters. I'm sorry, hundreds of labels, filters. And so it doesn't make any sense to say that for every single label I have, I'm going to set up a filter. I'm going to tie it, to this label in Gmail on mobile, and it's going to make some kind of deal saying, well, now you have an email from your sister. Now you have an email from your mother. Now you have an email from this. Now you have an email about your school. It becomes nuisance, because it continues to constantly bug you. And so the whole idea was to become more productive. Instead, it becomes counterproductive, because constantly you get notified with all these chimes that come in, except they're not chimes, they're specific words, but still, you still get interrupted. So that's why it's important to record only and do this label setup just for things that are actually really important to you, that you want to be notified about. And of course, keep in mind, you can always turn these label notifications off easily by just going through the same going to the settings on Gmail, pulling up label notifications, and then simply selecting the sound for that particular label to be, you either turn off syncing, that's one way to do it, or select sound to be silent, and then it's not going to make any noise. So once, let's say you like I mentioned before, if you're working on a project, and once that project is completed, then you can turn it off, because you don't want to be special notifications going in about this project when the project is basically underway, and you don't want to be interrupted anymore. So definitely do not set up this kind of environment for every single label and have recording for every single situation, because then it's just as bad as just looking at all your emails anyway. But for the important thing, and things that really matter to you, and things that you think would be useful, then for those it makes sense to take a few minutes, because you can see the process is pretty straightforward. You just need to go through the steps, but it's pretty quick. And it enables you to have this kind of functionality where, um, I'll send one last email here. And so we'll send one more email. Let me jump here and we'll say, send up another last email. Last email. This is also important. Something, whatever, and we just send it. Okay, and I'm going to jump out from the presentation here. Back to me. And so the phone is right here. And we'll basically, as we talk here, you'll see that I'm not doing anything, not pushing anything, and not selecting anything. It's just the phone is there. And the email obviously comes in immediately, practically, to, see? There was a little knocking. That's a different.
This email is coming from Ben, and it's important.
Yeah, see? And then it chimed that because the email came and said that it played that specific custom recording for what I set up for Ben. So as you can see, it works pretty well. You get the stuff pretty quickly, pretty consistently, and it's a really nice feature if used correctly. Okay, so let's finish out our presentation here. We'll jump right into here and move on to the next step here. And the next step is, thank you very much for joining me today. Again, my apologies for not being able to start on time because of slowness of Hangouts today for something, or Google in general. If you need to reach me with any questions, you can certainly do so at any of the following addresses on Google+. I'll be happy to answer them. If you have some other ideas or anything about using this functionality, I'm always open to, all kinds of different things that seem to make sense, that make you more efficient, more productive. And just to recap, this process allows you to set up something one time and have your mobile device notify you about things that are really important to you. So in terms of emails, so it allows you to not, like my friend and client Mark Barris was actually wrote a comment saying that, he used to constantly get these chimes about you get new email. So he constantly, because some were important from clients, some were not important, he constantly had to go back to the phone and check email to make sure he doesn't miss anything important. And that's a very significant time killer if you get a lot of emails. And this morning I had to go do something and I didn't check my email for practically most of the day. Excuse me. When I looked, I had 226 emails that came in today, not even for the entire day, just because I haven't done my usual 3 times a day checking. And so you may not be getting as many, maybe you're getting more. Bottom line is we're getting a lot of emails. And so when you get a lot of emails, if you do what Mark was saying, where you constantly get chimes that you got new email, and you constantly keep checking to see what it is, it's a major time killer, major time waster. I mean, yes, it only takes a few seconds here, a few seconds there to pull down the menu and see notifications. But the bottom line is it really does take, when you add up all these seconds, they quickly turn to minutes and eventually turn to hours and weeks. And it just takes a tremendous amount of time over time that you're wasting, that you could be doing something actually productive. And so using this approach to say that whenever I get email, I don't want to be notified. Whenever I get email that's important to me, then I want to get notified. And that's where this approach works perfect for that, because you set up these labels, you set up the filters to assign these labels, and then you tie these labels to sounds, and you record custom sounds, so you know exactly what, it's like your secretary basically walking in and telling you, you have an important email about this project, or, your wife called and, whatever. And so in this case, it's not calls, it's emails, but the same concept. So now Mark doesn't have to keep checking email every time he gets the chime. He doesn't get any chimes. He just sets up so it only chimes for things that are important and coming for his business. And so whenever it actually says you have emails regarding the business, then he can go ahead and check it out and do whatever he wants to do with it. But using this audio deal, really saves time because you can be working on something else. The phone is right next to you. It says that you have emails about the business. So if you want to take the time, obviously nobody's forcing you, but you can go and take care of it right then, and be done with that. Much more efficient approach, and much saner approach. And I mean, I think it's extremely useful. A lot of people don't know about this particular feature of mobile Gmail, but it's there and it works, and I definitely recommend that you use it. So with that, I'm going to jump into the private video conference on appear.in/PCS. If you want to ask some questions there directly to me, you can certainly do that there for the next, I don't know, about 10 minutes. I'll be there, 10, 15 minutes. So it's appear.in/PCS. And other than that, thank you for joining me and watching this, and take care. Till next time.